This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, we now bring you a discussion on setting up of Development Finance Institution. The participants are Sharat Kohli, economic analyst, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, AIR correspondent.
The Union Cabinet today approved the bill for setting up financial institution called DFI, the new Development Finance Institution. Mr. Kohli, could you tell us the exact reason why the Cabinet has approved a bill for setting up this financial institution? What would be its role in terms of the infrastructure objectives of the government?
When you move from a developing economy to a developed economy, the one thing which identifies these countries and differentiates these countries from a developing country is a very solid and a robust infrastructure. So I think when the Prime Minister put his dream of taking the country to the very near goal of $5 trillion economy, we're already around $3 trillion. So when he declared that let's all aim towards having $5 trillion, the very first thing which I think struck the minds of the think tank of the government is development of infrastructure. And in the current scenario, when the last 1 year has been extremely difficult for the entire world, we found that jobs were lost, we found that the businesses had to scale down, government revenue dried up, and the overall economic pace slowed down. In fact, the first 2 quarters meant country going technically into recession, although we're glad that it has now come out of that theoretically recessionary phase. Now, the only and the best way for the country to come out of this recession was spending. And I think there was a lot of debate when Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan was launched on the spendings by the government. And here we go now. The government has taken the lead of making the infrastructure spend. And having said that, I would like to state here that even before Corona, the National Infrastructure Investment Fund was already done. I mean, National Infrastructure Pipeline was announced much earlier, and the country was committed even before Corona crisis to invest about 102 lakh crore rupees to develop infrastructure. So I think with that goal in mind, I would say the Finance Ministry, the government has extrapolated that and gone one step ahead by making the announcement of opening DFI, which is called the Development Fund Institution. So the institution means that will be conducted, will be formulated in the form of a bank where government has made the first move to contribute. In fact, 5,000 crores of initial grant has been given. Another 20,000 crores would be given as capital by the government. So basically, the character of the bank, the Development Fund Institution, would be that of like a World Bank, wherein the capital will be raised from various institutions and maybe in future from retail investors also sometime down the line, maybe not immediately. You might see participation of sovereign funds, insurance funds, pension funds, for which some amendment to Stamp Duty Act would have to be done, because to allow these funds to pool in money or invest in this DFI, I think some amendments would be done, but that of course is a legislative process which will be done sooner or later. But when the money comes in, this money will then, to make our listeners understand easily, once these funds come in, which means these pension funds, sovereign funds, the government grant, the government capital, when everything comes down into DFI will start disbursing money for large infrastructure projects. Now, in case our listeners want to know that what kind of infrastructure projects, broadly speaking, we are looking at ports, we are looking at national highways, we are looking at rail facilities, we are looking at setting up of industrial parks and so on and so forth. I mean, the list can be endless in terms of the total investment which the government plans. So I think from moving from an emerging economy to a developed economy, I think this is the best road that the government could have taken, the best doorway that the government could have set up to enter into the world of developed economy for every citizen of our country.
Mr. Kohli, let's now get to the nitty-gritty of how this actually functions in terms of the advancement of a loan or the disbursement of it. So what kind of guarantees or participatory conditions are actually imposed by the lender on the borrower? Could you just explain that for the benefit of our listeners? Because clearly the borrower would be a beneficiary in terms of your MSME, who would be looking to ensure that they can participate in any bid process or be part of a project.
This will function like a lending institution. That this will not be like a shopping bag where you can go and shop for money and invest. This will function like a development bank. And for our listeners who have seen the functioning of institutions like IDBI, IFCI, or for those who know how does World Bank or something like an IMF function, I think they would get a better feel. But nevertheless, to help you understand easily, the pool of resources which will be created from the government and from the sovereign funds, pension funds, and insurance funds They will come in here. And then suppose a person wants to launch. When I say person, I mean either a government agency or a non-government agency or a semi-government agency or a PPP model, which we call it as public-private partnership. You file an application, prepare the project that we would like to set up. For example, you would like to set up a port on coastal area. You prepare the project report, submit the project report, prepare the total outlay. How much do you think you're going to invest? Who are going to be the beneficiaries of this project? You will have to provide feasibility of this project. I have a feeling, although the nitty-gritties of DFI is yet to come in front of the people at large, but I think in all probability, private infrastructure promoters would also be allowed. As I said, you will have a three-pronged model, a pure government, that is, suppose a state government wants to develop infrastructure, the state government can approach DFI. There is a private promoter, a private company, a private developer, a private infrastructure player who wants to develop something, he can come forward. Or there is a PPP model, whereas a government and a semi-government agency or a private agency want to come together. They can approach DFI, they can submit their project report, their feasibility report, and the feasibility report should have a very detailed description of the nature of the project, who are, as I said, who are going to the beneficiaries, who is going to be the total outlay, how much time is it going to take to complete the project, what contribution will that project make to the overall country's infrastructure in terms of its utility and in terms of its value. With all these details, you make a submission to DFI. I'm talking in present tense to help you understand easily. You make a submission. The committee on DFI, the board of directors of DFI, whatever is the organizational structure, like it happens in case of IDBI or other government institutions, there'll be a board of directors. There's going to be a credit approval committee, which will be headed by competent people. They will study the infrastructure report. They will study your feasibility report, and approval would be given. Sanctions would be made for the development of the project, whereafter the funds would disburse, and DFI would monitor the progress of that particular infrastructure to see that it is coming in line with the intended objective. So I think the procedure is going to be very simple. It's not going to be like drastically different from the way other such financial institutions have been functioning.
Mr. Kohli, the bottom line is that whatever loan is advanced, it should be a secure transaction. So who is going to guarantee this loan? That's one. And secondly, the government has already stated that it would be the 100% owner of this development finance institution. So when you talk about the participation by other financial companies or entities, they would clearly be buying into the stake of this DFI. But right now the case is that there would be beneficiaries from a capital expenditure of 5.54 lakh crore rupees that the government has promised into this DFI. So my question is that how will they secure this transaction? Because under the World Bank model, the member nation guarantees the loan that's taken by any person or entity so that the bank is eventually repaid. That's how the transaction is secured. So how will DFI be secured in the transaction whenever they advance a loan to anyone so that it is not sticky like the situation that IFCI or IDBI faced?
I mentioned about three kinds of borrowers. One borrower could be a third-party government agency itself, that is another government agency, which wants to promote the project, which can knock the doors of DFI. The second agency could be a state government, where a state government wants to develop in one of its state capital or other regions some infrastructure-related project, it can knock the doors of DFI. Third could be PPP model, that is public-private partnership, where there is a government agency and there is a private promoter, both come together. And fourth and the last model also could be there, where there could be purely a private promoter. Now, to answer your question very precisely, in all the four categories, as far as the first category is concerned, where another government agency is developing the project, I think there is going to be a sovereign government guarantee anyway, because it's the left arm guaranteeing the right arm, so it's the same body basically. When it comes to state government knocking the doors of DFI, I think the sovereign guarantee of the state would be there for the repayment, like it happens when state borrows from RBI and other institutions. Coming to the third one, when it's a PPP model, I think the government undertaking or the government agency which is partnering with the private institutions or private promoters will ensure that those private promoters are able to provide sufficient collateral security. The security of the project and sufficient collateral security has to be there, which can be used in case there is a default. In the fourth category, where there is a complete private involvement in developing the infrastructure and the private, I would say, promoter is big enough to knock the doors of DFI, we must also remember that when a private player develops infrastructure, So it is under BOLT process, which is build, operate, lease, transfer. So only for a certain period of time, the ownership, or I would say quasi-ownership of the project, remains with the private player. Eventually, when the relevant collection is made, it is transferred to the government agency. So therefore, I really don't think, because as I said, a lot of lessons have been learned from the past. So whatever slippages, whatever flaws were there in the lending process in these earlier institutions, which have been there for ages now, I think they would be taken care of, because we are incepting something in a very modern era where a lot has been said about NPAs and sticky loans and the processes by which they were disbursed. I think all those loopholes will now be plugged, and no stone would be left unturned to ensure that the security of the money being lent, after all, it is going to be taxpayers' money. So I think the government will ensure that adequate security has been taken so that no loan, no project turns out to be dud or dead.
So you spoke about eminent people who would be on the board of directors or governors, however which way this trust organization is set up. You spoke about oversight also. So what is the caliber of the people we are looking at in terms of experts and advisors who would be looking at the feasibility of any loan application so that, there is a proper repayment and the project is self-financed as well eventually?
I would say premature for me to make speculations on that, but by experience I can tell you that competent management who are able to properly assess the project, who are able to appraise the project would be there. This could be, chairman of the various banks. These could be representatives of RBI. This could be senior bureaucrats who've got experience of credit appraisal. This could be senior people who've handled financial institutions. This also may have people with international experience of being in IMF or World Bank. So it could be a combination of this collective wisdom which may come in, because at the end of the day, you have a dual objective of developing the country and financing the projects. I think DFI has got a dual objective. So you need experts who are able to fulfill both these objectives. Look at the advantages. This will result in creating jobs. This is going to make ease of living accessible to everyone. This is going to make ease of doing business. It may raise India's index on ease of doing business to a higher level. I mean, we may be able to attract more investments. Any developed world, I think, catches attention of rest of the world. I think same thing is going to happen here. Not that India is right now not attracting investment, but I think this would prove to be kind of an engine of growth. And India needs about $4.5 trillion of investment in infrastructure by the year 2030 to be able to continue on the growth path. And we need infrastructure of about $3 trillion investment by the year 2025. So I think with the goal being higher, the country does need this kind of effort, which will come through DFI to ensure that country is able to reach those targets. And I feel so proud that a few years from now, we are going to live in a world which is a developed world. We will no more be called as a developing economy. We will no more be called as an emerging economy. I think this is the right step. And now all the critics of the government will not be able to point fingers. And for the sake of our listeners, I'll give a very interesting piece of statistics. Every 1 rupee spent on, for example, construction of road has a 8 times multiplier effect. When I say multiplier effect, to give you examples, the children go to school, the businesses are able to transport goods, consumers are able to reach, the citizens are able to travel, intercity, inter-village business starts happening, agriculture gets promoted, industry gets promoted. 8 times multiplier. So you can very well imagine, if we are looking at $4.5 trillion of investment in the country over the next 9 years, you can imagine the multiplier effect and where our country, in fact, I am foreseeing, Arjun, India as an economic superpower once this DFI gets into full flow.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sharath Kohli, for being with us on this program and explaining to our listeners what the role and responsibility of the Development Finance Institution is going to be in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on setting up of Development Finance Institution. The participants were Sharath Kohli, economic analyst, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, AIR correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.com. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.